When I was little, I had heard of my great-grandfather coming to America and other stories over the years. I was intrigued by the stories and I wanted to learn more about him. However, I never really got to know my great-grandfather as he passed away long before I was born. My dad told me stories about him and how he was such a good man to spend time with and was quite the jovial guy, and yet I couldn't feel a connection because of his absence. I felt that by doing this project, I could create a meaningful connection with my great-grandfather and my family history that I had not known before, as well as have something in my memory for times to come. Carmelo Auditore was born on September 2nd, 1891, in the province of Scaletta Zanclea on the island of Sicily off the coast of Italy. In his youth, he maintained a farm in the province where he tended goats, chickens, and olive trees. He traveled once to the United States for a trip in 1917 before his permanent departure and returned to Sicily after a short period of time. He served in the Italian Navy for 7 years and was stationed in locations such as Constantinople, Turkey, during World War I, which he discussed often with his family. While serving in the Navy, he corresponded frequently with his love, Maria Aloisi. When he returned from service, he saw the woman who would become his wife dressed in black because of her brother's death during World War I and the death of her father. He asked his mother to talk to Maria's mother so they could meet with one another. After coming back from the war, he served as a sexton at his church in Sicily and looked after it, such as cleaning it and being in charge of the candles and candelabra for Christmas Eve. In 1926, Carmelo and Maria were married, but Maria's mother couldn't go to the church because she was paralyzed. She was able to see them from the balcony after they left the church, as cars weren't around in Sicily at the time. On February 22nd, 1926, 2 weeks after they were married, Carmelo and Maria left to go to the United States from Palermo, Sicily, on their honeymoon, despite Maria's mother being sick before their departure. Carmelo and Maria never saw her mother again after making the trip. They left on a ship called the Giuseppe Verdi for its last voyage to New York City, and the ride proved to be very rocky. So rocky that Maria couldn't go to the dining room because of seasickness. But Carmelo was used to the ride because of his time in the Italian Navy. 2 weeks later, they arrived in New York City and settled in with Carmelo's brother Frank in Brooklyn for the time being. Carmelo worked as a cobbler in Sicily and became a shoe repairman with his brother working in the Bronx, but he didn't make enough money with the job. He was able to find an apartment in Brooklyn for himself and Maria in the late 1920s on 86th Street, and he was able to start a family with Maria and his two daughters, Angelina and Antonina, my great-aunt and my grandmother. Their living environment was tough as Carmelo didn't make much money for the family, and in the 1930s during the Great Depression, he and his family lost the apartment that they were living in at the time because they didn't have the money to pay the rent. He was able to gain another apartment, but it wasn't until World War II when he gained better conditions. He answered an ad in the newspaper and he was able to get work at a defense plant on 57th Street in Brooklyn during the war. With that job, he earned a lot of money from the experience. He was very happy with the situation. He was able to get chocolates for my great-aunt and my grandmother whenever he came home from work after he got paid. In the 1950s, Carmelo, his wife, and the rest of the family moved out to Long Island in Hempstead on Brown Avenue. Previously, he had moved to Bay Ridge and was the superintendent of a building with his family. On Long Island, he spent his time maintaining gardens at the house for corn, cucumbers, as well as squash, and he had a room in the unfinished basement where he made his own wine. He and Maria remained married for over 50 years and were able to celebrate their 50th wedding anniversary in 1976. 2 years later, however, Carmelo passed away at the age of 87. While there are other memories of my great-grandfather I may not know in the future, I have seen that he was a very good family man who loved his children, grandchildren, and other relatives. I learned that he was active with churches in both Sicily and New York, instilled the importance of religion to his daughters as well as honor and integrity, and painted a version of the Last Supper that's still held today of my great-aunt. Overall, he focused on living in the United States and making a living for his family and his new life. Knowing this, I am glad to have created a connection with him that will remain with me for the rest of my life and my family's life.